All right, so we're talking about aggregation in C++. And aggregation is just nothing more than a class contains an instance of another class. Or in other words, a class contains an object of another class. So let me go to the whiteboard here and draw this out a little bit, what we're kind of getting at. You know, we've seen with inheritance that we can have class A then derive to class B, which could then even derive to class C. That's one structure that we looked at. We looked at multiple inheritance where class A and then a separate class B, both of those then can inherit to a class C, and class C would have all of the public methods available to it from both A and B. Well, here we're doing sort of embedded, where class A, in and of itself, will have an instance of B. So one of the class A private member variables or data elements will itself be an instance of another class. And the book's got some great examples, and then the example in the lab assignments, a very good one. Now, what I'm going to do today is we're going to do exactly this. We're going to create a class. I'm going to go still off of the class of cars. So if let's suppose we had a car. So here's just kind of our rough class. You know, we might have, you know, some data elements here, you know, data type and whatever they are. All of that's good. But then I'm going to add something a little more complex. I'm going to say this car also contains a wheel set. And that wheel set is of type wheels, or in other words, I'm going to create a class that's called wheels, and it's going to be then included in the class car. That sort of makes sense. Some of the previous assignments that we've had that could fit this would be like a furniture class might contain, you know, a set of chair legs. A person could contain a date class object for their birthday. A house could contain a kitchen object that contains all of the data and methods for the kitchen. And then the house could contain a living room and so forth. So you kind of see what we're doing here. We are nesting or embedding objects within objects. So if we then looked at our wheel class over here, you know, we might have some private member variables, and then of course the you know, whatever methods we need. But it's as though all of this then gets contained and embedded right here in this wheel set object that we've created. So we're talking about, you know, we talked about data abstraction before with these a hierarchy of classes. Here we have sort of the same thing. You know, we've got two levels of abstracted data based on the way that these objects are created and instantiated. Okay, so that's sort of what we're going for here. So the code I'm going to show you now, we can expect to see a wheels class that's going to be just a basic class with maybe a couple of things in it. And then a car class, which would contain the wheel objects. Okay, so let me go back to sharing. And here's my old Xcode. And I'm going to first bring up, let me hide the console real quick. Oops. Let me hide the console. Get a little more real estate on the screen. And here's my wheels class. Very simple. It's got an int, a string, and a string. The number of wheels, the profile, meaning is it a high profile tire, or is it a low profile tire? And then a string for rims, such as chrome, steel, molybdenum, whatever rims might be made out of. So we have a pretty fairly easily contained wheels class here. Here's a very standard constructor that at this point in the semester, you can type that with your eyes closed at this point. And then just a simple print function that is going to output all of that class data. So there's our wheels, okay? That's wheels. It starts to get a little sticky when we look at the aggregated base class. Okay, so let's go to car.h. Okay, now first of all, cars.h has got to include wheels.h, and that's because we're going to be creating a wheels object within this class. Now, here is our class. Here's car. We've got these private member variables, which look all familiar and reasonable. A couple of strings for make and model, an integer for year. But then we have got a wheels object, and I'm going to call it a wheel set. So we are creating an object embedded inside this car object. So let me say that again. We're creating an object that's itself going to be embedded in the car object. Now, if we were doing inheritance, then we would be very familiar with the fact that this syntax here looks like something that we would do with inheritance. Of course, we would have wheels here. And that's because of how we pass those parameters to the wheels constructor. But note here, we can't follow this syntax, first of all, because it's a syntax for inheritance, and aggregation has nothing to do with inheritance. It has to do with embedding. So we can't do wheels here, but what we do is we put the object name there. You put wheel set rather than the wheels class name. You put the object in there. And here in our constructor for the car, we're actually going to have 4 things sent to it. The make, the model, the year. Oh, and by the way, a completely new object of type wheels. And I'll call it WS. And then here, in the second half of this constructor's header, is where we pass through that temporary wheels object, WS. And we're just going to pass it right on through to that object. Now then the rest of the constructor is very standard. You've seen it here. Here we'll just assign make to the temporary variable mk, the argument that's coming in. Same thing with model. Here's how we set year. I'll do a real quick data validation and just say, okay, year's got to be over. It's got to be a positive integer for year. And here I'll throw, if the year is less than 0, meaning we're in an error condition, then I'll throw a console error message up there with CERR, and then just say, okay, there's an error in this construction, and I'm going to go ahead and set it to a default value of 2020. That's just a programmer's choice. You could certainly have them re-input the value. And then here we set it to 2020. Otherwise, if the year's good, we're just simply going to set year to the YR parameter that was set to it. And then here we've got for our print function, very standard there. We're just going to dump the car data. And then I'm going to call wheelset.print. Remember, wheelset is the name of our object here. So we're just going to call that wheelset.print method. If we go back to wheels.h, we can see what that print method is going to do for us. And that is, it's just going to dump the 3 private member variables there: number of wheels, profile, and rims. All right, so when we go to our main program now, the first thing that we'll do is we'll first create a wheel set object. All right, so there's mine. It needed those 3 argument set to it, and let's validate that here over in wheels. The wheels constructor, it needed an integer for the number of wheels, and then a string for profile, and a string for the rims. So this is exactly what those are, an int, a string, and a string. This is a low profile tire, and it has got chrome rims. I want those. I'd love some chrome rims now. I got to take a note to myself. Go buy some chrome rims. Here you go. All right. And then now that we've got that wheel set object created and then instantiated with these elements, well, then we create our car object. So I'm just doing it, my car, nice and simple. And if we go back to car.h now, we see that, okay, the constructor for car.h, it needed these four things: make, model, year, and a wheel set object. So here are those four things: a make, a model, a year, and a wheel object. And mine's called wheel set. And then I just call mycar.print. That's going to call up the print method that belongs to that object. And since this object is of type car, it's going to go to car.h and print out this stuff. It's going to execute this method. And this method itself will also go to wheelset.print and print out whatever is in wheels.h. So then we'll have our wheels, our profile, and our rim. We have this kind of backward daisy chaining of prints. All right, so let me run this now, and we'll see here in our console. Let me get rid of this one here. We'll see here in our console that we do have all of the private member variables output, including the wheels object, and then of course the car object. So our car object output this very first part, and then that called wheels, and then our wheels printed out the wheels, profile, and rims. Okay, so that's a super quick primer in aggregation. Not too difficult to understand. It's like embedded for loops. We just have to manage those. Well, now we're doing embedded objects, and we just have to manage those and take note especially of what the syntax differences are between aggregation and inheritance, because there's that slight syntax difference in the constructor that could throw students for a loop there. All right,